Hey everyone. If you saw the email yesterday on the follow up email to the posting of the first paper assignment on Plato's Rhetoric, then you saw that I mentioned I would follow it up with a little video, 5-ish, 10-ish minutes, just talking through the assignment a little bit more. Some students from a previous semester asked if I wouldn't mind doing that, and I was happy to, and it seems like it was pretty helpful. I understand normally when I'm presenting an assignment in class, we have an opportunity to talk it through together. So I'll try to do that here, just to kind of give you more of a sense of where we're coming at with this assignment, what we're hoping to do here. So this week is Aristotle week. Last week was Plato week. And for the first paper assignment, when I teach this class, there's always that question of like, which of the models do we want to focus on? And it's frankly usually Aristotle because he's the most readily available in terms of like analyzing a speech or something like that. There's always, lots of stuff that you can draw on with Aristotle to do an analysis and make an argument. But I feel as though maybe Plato might be a bit more relevant right now, strangely. And, I've been teaching Plato for many years, and it's usually like a kind of fun, weird, trippy set of lectures about, this guy who had these strange ideas about, immaterialism and idealism, and the fact that ideas that we have in our head are just kind of copies of like these primordial ideas and these forms that represent, or not even represent, but are the kind of true essence of earthly notions, concepts, justice, wisdom, beauty, and so on. These are like these divine ideas, concepts that we are trying to live up to and approximate. So Plato usually comes across as a trippy kind of experience, but kind of irrelevant and, neither here nor there. But I'm sensing that we are sliding into more Platonic times than previously, where we might find ourselves in more Aristotelian or Isocratean times, or even Gorgianic. So I think that we are in kind of Gorgianics and Platonic times, because there's very little appetite for debate and engagement and persuasion, frankly. And so then we find ourselves with these other two models to think about. And the Platonic model is one that I find myself thinking about a fair bit lately. So that's the broad impetus. And then when I usually teach Plato, we go through the Gorgias, and the Gorgias is like the base version of rhetoric. He says that rhetoric is a form of flattery, like cookery, and all it does is it attempts to gratify and produce feelings of comfort and affirmation in the audience, and it doesn't actually like elevate or inspire, and it doesn't educate, and it's actually not dealing with anything real and true. It's just trading in appearances and making people feel happy or whatever, right? Yeah, so he critiques rhetoric in the Gorgias as being a debased form of flattery, and it's just this knack that we develop, of a knack of producing gratification in an audience, right? So that's the Gorgias, and then we cover the Phaedrus, and in the Phaedrus there's a more welcoming, kind of accepting account of what rhetoric might do, but it's pretty unsatisfying in terms of like how to do it, right? And that's really where this assignment wants to sort of take off. So I'll identify the two kind of parts of the dialogue that are relevant for the assignment. The one is the analogy of the chariot, the charioteer, which I cover in my Plato discussion lecture. And the other one is the very end, where Phaedrus and Socrates / Plato are talking about, what is rhetoric? And it's this business of leading souls, right? And so that business of leading souls and identifying souls is really where the business of what rhetoric can be in terms of a Platonic register, or of a Platonic version, right? But it's cryptic and it's abstract, and it's hard to know how to do what he's actually sort of talking about, right? So I've always been kind of intrigued by Plato, but also like unsatisfied with how is it that we become a Platonic rhetor in the sense of like identifying souls and leading souls, right? Because he doesn't say too much about it. So then along comes this Pixar movie, which I watched, when it came out a month or two ago, just called Soul, and I was pretty blown away by it. I was a little surprised. It wasn't quite what I was thinking, but it's another, I think, really interesting film by Pixar. That movie, what is it, Inside Out, where it's all about the kid and their psychology. It's sort of along those lines. And it's really, really sharp in terms of like thinking about the soul, whether or not we believe it actually exists. It's certainly a way of talking about a quality of life and about, you know, quality of ourselves and being individuals. That's intriguing, right? Because it really speaks to our basic humanness and what is it about us in terms of like big questions about knowledge and morality and why we do what we do and the afterlife and so on. And so this Pixar movie is quite thoughtful about the composition of the soul and how it's formed and what it is and what it is not, right? And so I don't want to spoil anything too much here, but there's an important distinction that the film is making in terms of like understanding the difference between purpose and spark, or passion and purpose, and the soul is this sort of journey of trying to figure out who am I, what's my like, you know, path kind of idea. And along the way, there's lots of really interesting like interpretations of what goes on in the afterlife and the before life, and there's this business of traits and everything. So the hope here is that this text, this film, might actually help us open up this question of like, what is the soul? How might we as rhetors or scholars of rhetoric or students of rhetoric, how might we be thinking about the job of rhetorical invention in line with this question of the soul, right? So if we take Plato seriously, that rhetoric's job is to like ignite some passion or some desire that is sort of connected to the soul, and it's about kind of uplift and elevation, then how do we do that more kind of specifically and concretely? And does this film have something to say about that in terms of what we could latch onto and how we could appeal to audiences thinking along the lines of the soul, right? It's a tricky consideration, right? Because the soul is something that you can't see, you can't test, you can't smell. It's like, where is it, if it's anywhere? And so you're talking about a kind of a quality of humans and a quality of audiences that may or may not actually exist. And yet we can talk about the difference between a speech that is oriented towards something good and beautiful, and we can talk about a speech oriented to something to, you know, mean and confining and destructive, right? And the Platonic model really helps us there. And I think that there's an appetite right now out in the world, on campus, for thinking about kind of morality and thinking about who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And I feel like at any other time, when I've been teaching this class and this kind of stuff, Plato has always been this oddity. But I actually feel like now is a time where we might be wanting to think about his legacy a little bit more directly. And maybe this movie is useful in that way, right? So a couple things that I'm still going to do here for the assignment. I need to clean up. I was just watching the Plato video yesterday, noticed that the audio is off. So I'll clean that up, fix that up, and prove that. I'm also going to extract the key parts from the Phaedrus, the chariot analogy. I think that's already done, but I'll double check. The chariot analogy in the very end where he's talking about the composition of the soul and all that kind of stuff. Those are the key parts to be thinking about for the assignment, so that you can really focus in on, you know, what's key and what's most important. I know the Phaedrus is this big dialogue, but there's just a couple of key moments that we want to focus on. So please do make sure that you watch the video, the Plato video of mine, and go through Rhetoric and what he has to say about Plato, and then, of course, go into Plato himself, especially the Phaedrus for this particular assignment. And if you want to do some outside snooping around, by all means, go for it. There's no requirement, but if you want a little bit of help, you can always look up YouTube videos on Plato and the Phaedrus and the soul, you know, with the usual cautions about who knows what kind of quality it might be. But by all means, like, I know that Plato can be tricky. He can be abstract and weird, and so if you want to kind of go elsewhere to get some help, I understand. If you want to reach out to me and set up a meeting or have an exchange online, happy to talk through Plato. I know that he can be tricky. I just taught him to my grad students last night, and we had a great time, but, you know, there's a lot of really bizarre kind of ideas in there about, like, reincarnation and so on. So I get it. But we're trying to think about these abstract ideas and these principles and concepts in a way that might actually be useful for thinking about rhetoric and the practice of rhetoric right now. So that's the hope of the assignment. Please don't get overly stressed about like, knowing Plato completely. We're really just trying to sort of get a handle on how he's talking about the soul and its usefulness for thinking about, the good life and leading people toward the good as a way and away from the bad, right? He's all about goodness, all about morality and beauty and order and divinity and all that kind of stuff, right? And hopefully, going through that movie, besides it being a really interesting film, will help us. Because I remember when I was watching, I was like, oh my goodness, this is Plato. I got to do this when I'm doing Plato because it's so relevant to what he's up to. So that's the parameters, more or less, of the assignment. Hopefully it's a fun and kind of challenging learning exercise. Do reach out if you have questions or concerns about Plato. I know that he can be challenging. And I think there was one last piece. Oh, yes, if you don't have a Disney Plus account, please reach out. This is a pretty new movie, so I'm pretty sure it's not anywhere that you can get it besides Disney. I have a Disney account, so I can maybe loan out my password and just change it for people if they absolutely cannot find the movie. I don't want to make it inaccessible or unduly stressful to watch this movie. So please let me know if you have that issue. And if a whole bunch of people have that issue, we might have to do something else. But I think we'll be all right. We'll figure this out. So that's the thinking on the assignment. It's, familiarize yourself with Plato on the soul, specifically focusing on the Phaedrus, and then watch the movie. Do be taking notes after you've covered and gone through Plato. Do take notes as you're watching the movie on things that kind of connect back in either direction, and what's going on in the movie that helps us understand maybe what Plato's up to and how rhetoric can play a part here, and what it is that we're doing when we are trying to appeal to the soul. It's an interesting question to me. So I hope it's fun. I hope it's learning and challenging and good time for you. And I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. So I'll sign off there and wish you all well. Take care.